Okay, I'm going to kick off. Welcome everyone to the Sky community call for the 25th of September. In case of any issues, please do let me know on the chat, but hopefully you all see the presentation in front of you. I'll start with our standard disclaimer now that nothing in this call should be construed as investment or any other type of advice. Everything discussed is purely for informational purposes for the Sky ecosystem community. We're going to stick to the regular agenda that we've had over the last few weeks. A very brief intro from me today. I'll try to keep it to 10 minutes or so before we get to the Q&A session with Rune. I'm going to start and jump straight into the main highlights that we've seen across the ecosystem this week. So the first call out is various proposals to be included in the October 2 spell. And for those wondering what a spell is, in case anyone's new, it's the mechanism through which on-chain changes are made. And these proposals are now coming for the bulk through the stars in the system. So the first proposal, which is details on the forum post from Spark, 12 items, a lot of them technical maintenance, but one that did catch my attention that I thought I'd call out was the infrastructure for Spark Savings V2 to be deployed. And that's a savings offering that will attend to USDC, USDT, and Ethereum. And different to what we've seen to date, that's not going to be a wrapper of SUSDS, but it will actually plug directly into the Spark liquidity layer. So more details in the post, but expect to see some interesting propositions being built on top of that. We also saw a proposal for the October 2 spell from Grove. So that's the RWA dedicated star. And they've included the deployment of the Grove liquidity layer onto Plume, giving them access to that very specialized ecosystem of tokenized RWA assets. And as part of that, a proposal for their first deployment on Plume, which is for the Apollo Credit Fund for a $50 million allocation there. The third component of the October 2 spell was a technical scope and initialization for Keel. And that perhaps is a new name for many. From the post, that's a new star focused on growing USDS and SUSDS on Solana. So no doubt more details to follow as that goes through the launch process. The second call out across the ecosystem was the detailed risk assessment posted for the Apollo Credit Fund from the team at BA Analytica. So anyone who's looking for a for the detail and the rationale behind the risk parameters, you'll find all of that in the post. And the recommendation is actually for a 9.99% capital requirement ratio, which basically means if the 50 million deployment goes ahead, then 5 million needs to be kept as risk capital to protect any potential losses to Sky. And you can expect to see the parameters, these risk parameters, work their way into the Atlas through the standard weekly process. The third call out is the executive vote did pass that included the Maker to Sky delayed penalty upgrade. From what I've seen on the forum, I believe Rune did mention that there would be a future spell that would propose a burn of the corresponding amount of Sky to that penalty. So I guess that will go through the review process with governance and follow-up actions to be posted soon. And last week we mentioned we would bring to this forum the main highlights from the recently formed Core Council. So for this week, I can confirm the highlights were a detailed review of the USCC risk parameters. And some of you will remember USCC is the delta neutral strategy from superstate that Spark proposed allocating to as part of the September 18 spell. And the detail behind that review is being evaluated, and you can expect that to be posted soon. The initial sort of thinking was there would be a capital requirement ratio there of 4.5%, and the rationale and detail behind that will be made available. The second highlight from the Core Council meeting was for a risk framework that would allow stars to directly hold Athena Pendle PT tokens. Up to date, they've only been able to lend out against collateral, against Athena PT collateral. So this would allow for the direct holding. An innovation or perhaps an evolution of the risk framework would probably introduce a CRR that reduces over time as the PTs approach maturity. So again, still in discussion and finalization stage, but I think the initial thoughts are quite clear. I'm going to do a very quick dashboard review this week before handing over to Rune. And for this week, for info.sky, I really did want to jump into one of the fundamental tabs, which is the total supply. So what this shows us is the total system supply across both USDS and DAI. And as such, it includes everything that's in the SSR, that's in token rods, that's in DSR, but it excludes anything that isn't considered circulating supply. So that is any debt that isn't backed. It includes stuff like liquidity buffers in the PSM or SLL or other liquidity layers supplied idle liquidity in protocols such as Sparklend, Aave, and Morpho. So this number represents a very technically true source of truth for the circulating supply. And you can see exactly what backs that circulating supply at a very granular level. In fact, if I click down here on others, you can see just how granular this is. So anyone who's looking for that complete transparency and granularity of what is backing every single dollar or token out there has this full visibility. And looking at that trend over a year, you can sort of get a feel of how it's moved. You can see this recent progress as we sort of come back to what was the time period high that was in Q1. What's worth bearing in mind about this high in Q1 is that it was driven by a very aggressive and expensive SSR strategy. And you can actually see that very clearly through other areas of the dashboard. So if we look at the savings rate over a year, you can see how there was a 2-month period in Q1 where you were in double digits for that rate, and it did, of course, drive the supply. However, that came at a cost, and you can also see that. And I'm sort of jumping around the dashboard just to show you the sort of diversity of data available here. But if we go in to the savings rate expense and look at that over the year period, you can see how at that end of that Q1 period, you had an annualized expense of over 500 million on the savings rate versus what we have today for 117. So it feels like we're sort of getting back to that high, but in a much more sustainable and I'd say profitable manner for the ecosystem. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Rune for a further updates and also a Q&A session.
Hello. Thanks for that, Rajiv. Yeah, I really don't have any specific update to give this week, so it will simply just be an open Q&A, and if there's nothing like if there's no like immediate questions, then I will just talk a little bit about the core council and the updates coming out of that. Yeah, so I guess I will. I mean, I saw the it was all mentioned here, right? That there's this there was the approval of USCC, not approval, but rather the intention to include that in the atlas. So the kind of the list that Rajiv had, if you look at the Apollo credit fund, that's something that's like a little bit that's further in the process, and I believe already the technical rails for actually doing those deployments have either already been made or they're close to being made. But then the core council updates, that's more like sort of a guidance on like the intended future things that the core council will introduce through Atlas edits. And so for USCC and also for the ability to directly hold the Athena Pendle tokens, this is in both cases is like an example of what we call arbitrary risk parameters, where there's sort of specific risk parameters for individual assets that are being coded directly into the atlas. And that's just being done because these are opportunities that are like they're pretty important opportunities, but right now there's not really a proper way to risk assess this type of assets. So they're given risk parameters directly, while a lot of other types of assets, like including, for instance, the ACRED Apollo Credit Fund, they're actually done following a more general risk assessment framework, which means that as we get better and better at onboarding, at like sort of opening up to deploy into ACRED and similar assets, it will eventually become totally seamless, and any number of stars will be able to do that in parallel, and they will just be able to figure out what are the technical requirements in terms of like deploying the infrastructure, getting the audits, and then what are the risk capital requirements to deploy into something like ACRED that can be rated a certain way, or CLOs, which we're also good at doing at scale now. So there's the question from Chris about introducing new stars. So the new star is not really announced, so I can't say anything about it, but I think it's coming in, I think it's like 5 days or so. The big announcement is happening. I think really the reason why it's being sort of sneak peek pre-announced to Sky Governance is that this is a project that's been referred to as Nova in the past, and so there's a lot of like references to Nova all over the place, and basically to avoid confusing people, then now the like a new name is being used to refer to it, right, which is Keel. And yeah, in that case, people that may have spotted Nova before don't get confused if you start see Keel and Nova and these things sort of like overlapping in the kind of really deep governance technical context. But in terms of like the actual like marketing launch, that's happening in a couple of days. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a star that's done in like a different way than how the other stars were done. So like how Grove and Spark was done. It's going to be interesting to see how this the autonomy and the ability to specialize in new areas, how that's going to affect the growth and the potential of this project. All right. So something about USDS and SUSDS available in Cosmos. I actually don't know anything about. So I haven't heard about that. Like this could be something that's being done through some kind of third-party bridge. But right now, we're still not like the full implementation of Skylink is still not quite there. Like it's very close, but it's actually been incredibly slowed down by the need to make it compatible with Solana. So that's just been a completely unbelievable, difficult task to make the bridge to Solana work, because there was a pre-existing bridge and it has to be migrated. But that's almost done, and that will then coincide with this new star that's focused on Solana as well. And then after that's done and finally sort of out of the way, then Skylink to a lot of other blockchain environments will open up. Which I guess, like, and you can also just do like, you can also just do any bridge you want. But the advantage of Skylink is that it's this type of, this kind of modern type of cross-chain fungible token. So you can move from any chain to any chain, right? You can move from Solana to Cosmos, for instance. You don't have to go back to ETH mainnet and then bridge again. Yeah, Sky, Althea, USDS. Yeah, I mean, cool. I mean, I'm really happy that that happened. I'm not aware of it, but I mean, it could even be one of the. For all I know, it could be one of the stars doing that. At this point, there's just so many people working in different directions. Will Sky work with Plasma? Yeah, without spoiling or revealing too much, the answer is yes. There will be some collaboration with Plasma. I think that in general, Sky has been very slow at kind of setting up, like collaborations and partnerships with like new ecosystems. But hopefully, the whole plan is that the way Sky does these types of relationships and partnerships is much deeper than what anybody else can do, because everything Sky does at this point is through leveraging, really long-term aligned and self-sustainable agents. Oh, there's one more thing I just thought of that I'm not really gonna do this sort of, I'm just gonna tease this concept basically. But so for a long, I mean, obviously one of the major cornerstones of what Sky's been working on for many years at this point is try to combine AI with DeFi governance and just generally applying AI to finance and sort of be prepared for that inevitable direction. And now that is starting to take a lot more. Like so what was basically built over the last several years was then like a huge amount of foundational infrastructure that wasn't really visible anywhere to like end users, or even really deeply involved insiders often wouldn't really be able to see what was being built, because it was just these like really foundational pieces, and also like research and just like getting sort of AI teams that are also crypto native together, all of which was a big challenge. But now, soon, like there's just a lot. There's a lot of progress, and the focus, what turns out to be the kind of the really major point where AI will sort of become real in a sense and start to properly interact with like with the efficiency and the capabilities of Sky, is through the allocation system, right? So this is something I have been talking about in the past in terms of what is the most impactful thing that's coming. So basically, there's a lot of progress on that front, and soon there'll be a lot more like transparency and publicity around it and so on, because it's actually something that a lot of people can support, and there's a big opportunity for like sort of broad public building and collaboration on. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any other major updates to give. I mean, we got STUSDS coming soon. That will be really interesting to see when that comes out. And that should hopefully really help drive growth, which is kind of the thing that like Sky has really been lacking, just like top line growth, right? But while it's been really good at optimizing the bottom line, and we're going through core simplification and so on. And so now launching STUSDS and providing a lot of incentives and so on for that, that's going to be it's going to be it's going to fit well with the fact that the rest of the system is now so well designed and ready for much more scale. And Herb asks, how's Solana doing? I don't really know how to answer this. I think a lot of people were counting it out a couple of months ago, maybe even just a month ago or so, with Hyperliquid sort of overshadowing Solana. I think now there's some indications that actually there's a lot of, like, there's just a lot, like, the Solana community is really, really gigantic. Like, it's a very huge economy, so it has a lot of inertia and a lot of momentum. And I think that's starting to maybe produce some results. But on that note, I also think Hyperliquid is a huge deal, and I think both of them are going to be like major. They both have the potential to become major economies and major ecosystems. And from the perspective of Sky, it really makes sense to have like a star that's focused on, like a pioneer star specifically, right? Like a star that's sort of a cross-chain focused star on each of these major ecosystems that have the potential to really continue growing for the next many years. Yeah. Any more questions, guys? Otherwise, maybe we can call it early today. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's see. There's a few more people typing some questions, so I will wait a second before I say goodbye and we shut it all down. So, okay, there's this one question here. So, so we seem to be deploying stars at a fast pace. Will there be an SDK to make it easier for stars to deploy and stay safe technically? So right now, we are in the Genesis agent phase, where the goal is to deploy around 15 so-called Genesis agents, which are these they are stars and also executors, so these like other types of Sky agents that do governance roles, that will basically be launched all with a lot of support and handholding from Sky Core, as well as capital provided directly from Sky. And for a lot of these, all of that capital will be deployed in December. So right before the end of the year, which is when the core simplification happens. And after that, there will not be any more possibility of spending money directly out of Sky Core, right? And instead, all profits in the Sky protocol will follow what's called the treasury management function and will accumulate in the treasury and be used for burn and so on. And then this Genesis agent phase, like there'll be this sort of ramp up of these Genesis agents. So a lot of them will probably launch this year and next year, and be sort of, to some extent, it's all about like standing them up, getting them running, just like getting the basics up and running for them. And then the next phase is then optimizing them. So that's kind of like upgrading, like once they're actually already live, then it'll be upgrading the processes, adding more AI to how they function, and helping them sort of specialize and tap into the scale and just like get a kind of get a sort of regular cadence of continuous self-improvement going for all of the Genesis agents. And then once that is really working and the learnings around how to effectively operate agents and then also how to regulate a lot of these agents in parallel, once that really is going, well, alongside this, there will also still be the occasional sort of whitelisted launch of a new Sky agent, and these would then no longer be Genesis agents. Like once it's something that's not like announced or decided until next year, it will not be possible for it to be a Genesis agent, meaning it will have to be entirely funded by external parties. It's not going to be possible for Sky to fund them. But the goal is then to, and then so a few new ones might be sort of authorized or whitelisted during Genesis phase if they have very specific strategic roles to play. But then the goal is basically to really like sort of figure out how to do it without scaling it so far that the capabilities of the ecosystem could get completely overstretched, and then automate everything, really develop and improve the AI systems. And then when it's all ready and it starts to become very easy to regulate all these stars, then we start moving towards permissionless creation of new stars. And maybe the permissionless creation initially might be something where there's almost like an auction or something like that, so that there's still something that like prevents the flooding of too many stars. But at that time, the point is to make it really, really easy for anybody to do it, right? And then move towards a point where it's like it's almost unlimited how many can be created, because the technology and the system in theory supports that. Like there's nothing really preventing just like having just an endless amount of stars. It's just that, yeah, all of the infrastructure has to be in place and everything has to be tested, and a lot of assumptions have to be tested and make sure they hold, and then it would be possible to really like open up. And I'm personally putting the goal at, we want to get to a point where we have 100 stars launching per day, right? So like a really, really dramatic amount of agents launching all the time. And what that also means is they would not be, they would not have like huge teams of humans. It would be more like you would have one team and they might actually be working with 10 to 20 stars each, or even more. And it will still work because the star fundamentally is not the team, right? It's actually simply the governance logic that's in the Atlas, and then the capital and the protocol infrastructure that's on the blockchain. And with AI, leveraging AI, it's going to be possible to get, to actually get a lot done with just those things and without having sort of a full-time dedicated team. Yeah, so let's hope we get there in a couple of years. All right. Last call for more questions. Otherwise, you'll all get half an hour back of your lives. Right. Well, thanks everybody. I will not be able to join the meeting next week. So now you know that, and then we'll see what will be arranged and what kind of content we'll do. See everybody.